We're the University of Dayton Game Development Club. We're located at the University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio. We kind of formed last year to get people to work on video games together. So we do stuff like work on game jams. In the past, we made kind of like a puzzle mystery game, and then pretty recently we made a visual novel game in C for a game jam. A lot of us are computer science students, but not everyone. I think everyone in this call right now, except for Obi, is a computer science student. So just for context. But yeah, would you just be able to give kind of like a brief introduction to yourself?
Sure, I'm Tom. I'm the lead developer of Ren'Py. For I believe it's been 21 years now, old enough to drink. I've been working on the engine. Um, and yeah, I mean, I make and release the engine. It's one of my main hobbies. Apart from that, I'm a software developer, ham radio operator, various other things.
Nice. So for anyone who might not be familiar, like what is RenPy?
So Ren'Py is a visual novel engine, a tool for making visual novels. It basically lets you it basically takes a script written in its own languages, which are often include a lot of Python but aren't exactly Python, as well as image files, audio files, movie files, formats like Live 2D and so on, and displays them. Uh, Handles game logic, handles a lot of functions like saving, loading, rollback, which rollback lets you revert the history of the game, gives you accessibility, and just various other options that people come to expect from the game, skipping, things like that, along with tools that you can then use to develop your own games, like the speech bubble system or NVL mode or, you know, just all the features. And the goal is like, because it's reusable, it can be used by, currently thousands of games. Um, and instead of everybody having, I mean, you guys obviously know, like you developed your engine. Imagine if every game had to develop an engine like that. That was a situation where Ren'Py was at when the project started. Every game did need a programmer to develop a custom engine for it. By developing a reusable engine, I figured it would enable teams that didn't have CS majors on the team to create games,
What was
more or
the
less.
landscape like for, I guess, off-the-shelf engines back when RenPy started? Because now we're kind of used to like, oh, Unity, Unreal, Godot, GameMaker, like the list goes on and on.
I'd say it didn't exist or it barely existed. I forget if Unity is older than Ren'Py or Ren'Py is older than Unity. I know we're about the same age. And like there were some earlier like interactive fiction engines like TADS and Inform are ones that I knew about. I don't think there were any of the big commercial game engines. There was things like I believe Doom had been released open source, so people could make like Doom. I know like Doom is obviously an engine, but it's very specific to that particular style of game. I mean, so it's run by specific visual novels. Um, so there really wasn't many tools. You're very much like starting with your libraries. Like SDL certainly existed from the start of RenPy, things like that. But you were pretty much starting with your OS level stuff, um, or your fairly low level like OS abstraction libraries, and you pretty much build the entire game on top of those at the time.
Did
Very
you
different markets.
leverage? Oh, sorry. Did you
Go,
leverage
go.
any libraries like STL when RenPy started, or were you working just like with a graphics API directly?
Yes, it was always there's actually Pygame, which is Python bindings for SDL plus some additional stuff. But it's mostly binding Python bindings for SDL. And RenPy in the early years was built on top of Pygame, which is then in turn built on SDL. So we've always been OS abstract. Even the first version ran on Linux and Windows, and then Mac got added relatively quickly in the development process. And then Android and iOS and web have all been much harder to add, but were eventually added. But yeah, we've always been built on top of these OS abstraction libraries. We never go directly to the OSs unless we really have to.
Yeah. Have you had any kind of struggles like over the years? Has there ever been something where you wanted to do something really specific and kind of the abstraction libraries wouldn't let you do it?
Not that I can think of. I mean, there certainly haven't. I'm sure there have been cases where I've just gone directly to the OS, like especially on like Android and iOS. You do that. Like, for example, their in-app purchases require more or less OS specific APIs. Things like get the aspect ratio of the screen, get the resolution. Like Android runs on smart TVs and runs on tablets, and those are very different interfaces you want for the two of them. So one thing I do is go directly into the Western Korea. So I've never been too shy about doing that, but like 99% of it goes through either SDL or eventually move to OpenGL for the graphics output.
So, what language is RenPy mostly implemented in? Do you write a lot of it in a low-level systems language and expose like Pythonic bindings?
I'd say no. There's essentially, I'd say it's probably about equally written in Python and RenPy itself. Like one of the goals of it was to, in both cases, either if you can write portions of it in RenPy, like a lot of the internal interfaces, things like that, are written in RenPy screen language, which is the GUI language. And then if you can write it in Python, I do that because the goal is like if you write the language in the language that the users who are using the engine can do, um, then they can extend it in ways that you can't if like RenPy was written in C. Now there is C, and there's actually a language called Cython, which is essentially a Pythonic languages, but that supports C typing. And depending on how you write it, it can like not grab. You can release global interpreter lock in Python. I don't know, are you familiar with that? With what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can release it and essentially run what is straight code that's bound to Python, and that handles both like some of the OS bindings written in Python and some of the like really performance critical code like image processing and things like that. But the goal is to do that 1% that really is performance critical where it's necessary. But then like all the game logic, displayable logic, as much as I can is written in either Python, and in general it's written with at least interfaces that are exposed to the user, which is why like part of it is like many things in it, many parts of RunPy you can replace if you want to with your own stuff, which allows games to do things that the engine itself wasn't specifically intended. Like if you ever wanted to write a mini game, like say a fighting game, I wouldn't recommend it. There's almost certainly better engines for that. But like if you need a mini game, then you could always just create a displayable that runs a mini game. And would it be harder than writing an dedicated engine? Yes. Would it be about the same as writing it yourself in C? Probably. That's the goal anyway. And like we do have
Yeah.
things like loading images for you, playing sounds for you, that kind of stuff that you'd have as a service.
Have you seen any interesting usages of RenPy, like even outside of what you thought was possible in the past?
I mean, certainly there's a bunch of uses. I take two things about that. One, there's like entire styles of games that I was just not expecting, like the games that are much more like messaging based, where like you chat on people with like a messenger program. Everything from like Christine Love's games, Analog Hate Story, Digital Love Story, for example, or some of the early ones. But that's been a whole genre that I wasn't expecting. Um, from I wasn't really expecting that genre, but people implemented that. And then like I've seen like games that are much more like there's plenty of games where I don't know how they did that. I probably could figure it out if I tried hard enough. But in many cases, I'm playing a game like I try not to go into engine dev mode when I'm just playing a game I'm enjoying. So it's like I see it. Oh, I don't know how they did that. I'm sure they built it out of the primitives that RunPy provides, but so that's just a nice experience that they go past what I intended.
Yeah. Do you go out of your way to play a lot of games made with RenPy?
I'd say yes. That's like most of my gaming. And I don't play like there was a time when I could play every game made with RunPy. That's not even close to the case anymore. I mean, there's thousands a year. So now it's very much ones that are like in my interests, which are kind of both like, I'm into science fiction and those stories. And also, I like games that use the engine like very well, like some of the mechanics that are, making interesting uses of the engine. So if I hear a game uses the engine interestingly, I will go out of my way to play it. Um, but yeah, I do play, yeah, I do try and play, a game or so a week.
Yeah. Was kind of your love for visual novel games what inspired you to create RenPy?
Yes, basically, I started off with like watching some of the anime that was inspired by visual novels, which like in early like around 2000 there was a boom in those. Like Canon 2002 was a big influence. Um, and then that got me into some of the earliest translated games as and also from there it was some of the earliest like English developed games. Lemonsoft Forums, which I now run, was a hub for like that very early community. I basically noticed that everyone was having to put together a team. You needed a writer, an artist, an engine developer, sound people, etc. Um, and it was the inspiration that one, I'd like to make a game eventually, but more like if I'm going to make an engine anyway, might as well make one that everybody can use rather than just one um, you'll use. And while I did make one game, 21 years later, I never made the game that inspired Ren'Py, so only some limited
Yeah.
success.
It seems like kind of a common pattern between like all the engine developers that I've talked to where sometimes if they create an engine with the game in mind, they end up never making the game and they're always working on the
Yeah.
engine until the end of time.
Yeah. I mean, and part of it is because like a game is finished, but the engine never really is. Um, I mean, like some Patreon games, obviously are never finished either. But like there's always like some new feature, some feature request, some bug fix that people want. Maybe one day I'll go back. Probably wouldn't make that game, um, but you know, certainly I'm glad to be a little part of so many games that other people make. And I will say it's not just me making Ren'Py anymore. There's a team, probably about 5 people that work on it regularly. Um, but yeah, just do yeah, I'd say that though the engine has proven to be a reasonable contribution.
Yeah. How has it, I guess, changed over its kind of long development cycle?
Um, so there have been a lot of like fairly major changes, a lot of just like progression in terms of like somebody's I realize that there's a use for a feature. I'd say the most common way Ren'Py changes is just noticing that like a lot of games are like re-implementing a feature. Like I'll take accessibility support. Like accessibility support was something I didn't even realize. Like I didn't think that there would be much call for it. I mean, it's a visual novel, but like I noticed people were starting to implement text scaling options and um, text to speech was something people were asking for. I was getting requested. So then, I did an initial implementation of that, got some feedback from people as to how it how that was going in. Um, and eventually like over the course of like multiple releases, that's gone from, nothing to a fairly major thing. Other than that, like Ren'Py to start with, one, it was built on top of Pygame. Um, two, it was a very simple 2D only um game. As time has gone by, it needed GPU acceleration as screens got bigger. It was just too slow to just get the CPU to blip everything all the time. So we had to move from. Okay, so price starting off is the first couple of releases were just for me. Version 5, I'd say, is like where it became fully useful for a skilled programmer to like 1, 2, and 3 were just the first 3 releases. 4 was like when I restarted development to make it something that everybody can use. 5 was where like a skilled programmer could make it a releasable game. 6 was big philosophical change, which was that Ren'Py should provide you all the tools you need as an unskilled programmer to get started all the way through the release process. So things like it downloading a text editor for you that came in there. Things like it being able to package your game up into zip so you don't have to do that yourself. Literally everything but uploading it to the web, Ren'Py does for you in terms of packaging. That was 6. 7 added 3D acceleration support. In general, it was just like every feature I could possibly think of in a visual novel engine was Ren'Py 7. And then like Ren'Py 8 was Python 3 support. And also like people have thought that aren't me have thought up features. And so I've been adding them as we go along. That's roughly where we're at now.
Yeah. I'm curious, like when you talk about streamlining for people who aren't experts, how do you get insight into what's causing people trouble basically learning the engine? Is it just a lot of like testing, or do you reach out to people that have used the engine before?
Uh, community forums and we have like a fairly active forum, fairly active Discord. Paying attention to that and like what the pain points people are getting. Thinking about it a bit. But it's like my general feeling is like RenPy is not the goal is not to like dumb it down to the point random. The goal is to be a tool for professionals. Like, and so a lot of decisions are meant to be optimized for medium size or larger games. Like there's other visual novel engines that you know let you drag like a flow chart into place for a game, that kind of stuff. RenPy doesn't give you that; it's textual language. But my feeling is like that isn't actually like it's a textual language people can pick up in a day. Is the goal for like a very basic game. And then from there, and so the goal is like you can teach people that, and then they can eventually expand their skills and do more stuff. So the goal is to in a day they learn it, then they don't have to take their hands off the keyboard to do it. Like imagine if instead of the languages you use, like say, etc., you were constantly going between the keyboard and the mouse in order to program. That would just really slow you down after a bit.
Yeah,
Um, so
that
uh,
makes sense. One thing I'm kind of curious about is like as like more popular games have been released on RenPy, like Doki Doki Literature Club and Class of '09, how has that changed the community and maybe the expectations on your part for development?
other than just stability, and especially like making sure interfaces remain stable over like games that have like a 5-year development. I like Katawa Shoujo, which had a notoriously long development cycle to that. But like interfaces have to remain stable because like somebody might be making a game from started 5 years ago. I can't break their game in every release. So backwards compatibility and fallback modes for so you don't have to update your project all the time are very important. And then it's very much like what I've seen in the community is like there will be some big game like Tokyo Literature Club that brings in a lot of new people into the community, and like as part of that, you start getting like a lot of questions. How do I make that exact same game? Like Tokyo Literature Club for the next year was like, how do I read the user's name out of the registry? Spoiler, but but yeah, but it's like and like that was just like copying the mechanic. But of those people, then like maybe a year, 2 years later, you have like the people who were instead of just trying to copy that popular game, they were inspired by it to do their own thing. And like those, one of those people will eventually make the next big game, or probably a few of them at this point will make the next big game that inspires the next generation of developers. So, I'd say like the community grows through like these big inspiring games that like have breakout popularity, and then well, what did they use to make it? How did they make it? I can make something like that. And a lot of them will then realize they don't want to make that; they want to make their own project. And some of those projects become really good.
Yeah. Have you given like technical support to any people who are working on like pretty significant projects or have worked on pretty significant projects in the past with RenPy?
Yes, like many of those games where you've mentioned have been at least like somebody's reported a bug and I fixed it, that kind of stuff. I don't really like do like straight up like one-on-one tech support, but like certainly if they find an issue in the engine or like they don't know how to do something, we'll do this. I will say more and more it's the community has taken over the support role. Like we have a very active Discord with some really fine people that are giving you tech support. So less of that is done by me now. But like when they find an issue, I'll work with you to solve it.
Yeah. Would you say that RenPy is kind of in like a maintenance stage right now? Do you have any big plans for the future, or are you kind of just trying to keep it in a good shape?
I'd say it's still being developed. One of the big features is we're working on is 3D support. The most recent release 8.4 has support for essentially 3D backgrounds using the GLTF format. So we can load in 3D models and display that. Kind of in 8.5, Live 2D didn't support the web at the moment, so we're going to have parity probably with Live 2D supporting the web, assuming I can get that working, which is an if, but probably can. So I'd say like on one hand, like a game engine is always in maintenance mode because like that's your number one thing is it has to work. Like I can never break it. I can rewriting it is not really an option because that would cause so much pain for the community, it would destroy the community. I mean, look at just how Python going from Python 2 to Python 3 hurt everybody. Um, but like at the same time, like each release does include features, and I dare say some fairly good ones. Like the bubble system is only a couple, like the speech bubble system is only a couple of releases old. There's a bunch of new accessibility features, so we're always adding to it. I mean, I don't know if that's maintenance mode or feature adding mode. I'd say it certainly is not like the early days when like every release had like you can do things you never could before. It's much more like taking the things people can do with it and making it part of the engine.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
It sounds like you are just kind of constantly, adding patches and fixing bugs and stuff, but you are kind of in a stage where you're introducing new features and in new releases. It's interesting that you're starting to incorporate 3D. Um, have you had any kind of challenges with that? Did you have to re-architect anything under the hood?
Um. Yes, there was actually a while ago, like the move. Uh, so we moved to OpenGL, then we moved to a rewrite of OpenGL that was much more designed around like 3D. So for the past maybe 5, even perhaps even longer years, RunPy has been treating your scene as 3D, had some support for it. And so now it was just, integrating the open asset importer library to load in the GLTF models. There's some re-architecting like to better separate out like the different matrices so we can do lighting and things like that. Um, so there's a lot of it was designed to eventually be able to do this. So it wasn't like a huge change, but there's always some changes. You realize, like, oh, I didn't think we need this, and now we do.
Yeah. One thing I
Um,
was kind of wondering is like, you mentioned to me when we talked that, RenPy is not your full-time job. You kind of support it by having a day job and you work on it in your free time. I'm curious what your career pathway has been like throughout the years that you've been working on RenPy as kind of a hobby project, and how does it support RenPy as a whole?
sure, I started off doing it. I was a grad student procrastinating, and that's when I thought, oh, it'd be fun to make a visual novel engine. It'll probably take a week, and to be fair, the very first version did take about a week, but it wasn't very useful for anyone but me. About half a year later, I was an intern at the Naval Research Lab in Washington, D.C., and noticed people were using this project. I just, made, put up, and totally forgot about it and said, oh, I should improve it and make it not terrible. And that's RunPy 4, which was what turned into the RunPy you have today. One of the big things is I was a full time work from home for essentially my entire career. So, like, whereas my father would spend like say 3 hours a day, commuting to New York City, commuting back. I've never had that. I'm done with work, dinner, and then I have a decent amount of time to come back here and work on RunPy each day. So I use that time to do it. And then it's nice that I have my day job is actually working in IoT, Internet of Things, specifically traffic safety sensors. One recent project is a radar that detects like queues of cars backing up on roads and will report to you that's happening, so you can then tell people, hey, there's a traffic jam ahead, you should probably slow down before you hit into it. And I work in everything from helping the electricians design the hardware all the way to device and server software. And then, more and more I've been working with cellular providers to find issues with their network to make sure this works reliably. So, and that leaves me enough time that when I'm done with work at the day, I can pop in and work on RunPy for a few hours. Uh,
Yeah.
and, it's amazing. Like you work like an hour or two per day on a project, over the course of a year. That's a lot of hours.
Yeah, the consistency is almost more important than like the volume each day. Like even if you get on and do one thing, it just adds up so fast and it becomes a habit too.
Yeah, like Jerry Seinfeld had a kind of principle that I actually adopted, which was that he would write one joke a day, and that at least gives him some each day. But like once you get in that mode where you're working on the project, like the hard part is I've always found is like that first. Oh, okay, I got to tear myself away from the other things I want to do to work on Ren'Py, or things that like I got to find some time to work on Ren'Py. And like once I'm in programming, I'm in the right headspace. I'm on a roll. Often it's very easy to okay, I finished that thing. I'll go on to the next thing. Not every day, but like just simply like do that thing every day, and simply that act of getting in the headspace, I think, really is super beneficial to sort of accomplishing what you want to do.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest part because sometimes I do the same thing where I'm maybe procrastinating a little bit, like getting on to work on a project, and then once I get
Yeah,
on, I'm like locked
yeah.
in the zone. Sometimes almost to a point where it's like I go until I've like exhausted everything that's like fun to do, and then the next time I get on, I've left myself something like
Yeah.
really hard and annoying.
Yeah, but like the nice thing is like one thing I do is like essentially a checklist every day. You check the box. And like once you have, in my case, 10 years of checked boxes, you don't really want to break that streak. Um, that's a little
Yeah.
crazy. But like even like a week, is where you start getting this like motivation. And so like even if you're like, oh, it's a hard thing, I don't want to do it, but I wouldn't want to break the streak. So
Yeah. Do you
and
have
it's
any? Oh,
it
go ahead.
also
Sorry.
is it also is very important to like leave yourself a mix of like easy things to do, like and also like a mix. Like if I only fixed bugs, it wouldn't be very rewarding. So like new features are almost like, oh, I get to work on a new feature, yay.
Yeah. Do you think you're ever going to try and get around to the game idea that you had that inspired Ren'Py?
Tough to say. Maybe when I retire, probably not that particular idea. I suspect that like if I'm gonna spend time developing a game, it would be one that like is probably better than that one was.
Yeah. Have you like over the course of working on Ren'Py had new ideas that maybe you dedicated like a little bit of time to and then kind of just got swept under the rug?
Yes. Yeah, it's
Are there any interesting ones that you feel like would be cool to share?
let's see. I once had a lot of concepts I've had have been like I've been inspired by some sort of anime that had, especially back maybe a bit before date, but there's a lot of anime where like it was like stoically accepting, the failure of society was like one of the themes, or like, doing our best to survive during collapse of society. And I've always liked stories in which, people fight against it. Uh, Heinlein's Tunnel in the Sky versus Lord of the Flies, which is like Lord of the Flies is, kids get trapped on an island. If I remember correctly, kids get trapped on an island, start fighting each other. So Heinlein's is kids are trapped on a planet and form a society and eventually, prosper until they're rescued. That's much, and like taking concepts from existing media and redoing that in like a and like thinking what is like the positive view of humanity version of that is something I'd like.
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea. I do like that kind of like optimistic spin on the genre that is normally like not very optimistic. Like I see people online, there's like the discourse around like zombie media where it's always like every new zombie
Yeah.
show or game is just like, oh, but the humans are the real monster. And there's no like
Huh.
nuance of like people surviving together against like a greater threat. I don't know.
Much more like I mean people would beat the zombies.
Yeah. Do you
Uh,
have other hobbies that you're consistent with outside of Ren'Py? I imagine you probably still keep up with like seasonal anime or read manga or things like that.
yeah, less manga. I do keep up with at least a few shows a season. I've gotten into ham radio. I'm actually vice president of a club that's been around since 1955 ish. It's a little questionable when it started, but once a year we go out and spend 24 hours just making radio contacts from the field, which is always fun. I should put together a program to handle our IT for that, so it was kind of a fun project. I routinely bounce radio signals off satellites as a hobby.
Have you ever contacted the ISS?
I haven't. So I've not spoken to an astronaut in the ISS, but I have used the ISS to relay a signal from myself to somebody on Earth.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know you could do that.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's actually running pretty much all the time, and you can do it with you need to get a license, but beyond that, it's like a $20 radio.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Do you have like a whole setup? I don't know if you're in like a house or an apartment. I know some people have like huge radio arrays behind their house.
Um, I have a moderately large antenna in the attic, and then a relatively small antenna on the two relatively small antennas on the outside of the house. But yeah, part of it is like I like experimenting with different designs and things like that. So I actually have a pole that I can raise and lower that the antennas are on.
Nice. I think I'm gonna open it up to questions for anyone else in the call.
Hey, how's it going, man? I'm Dan. Uh, so with your main job, so you're doing a lot of satellite stuff, and I imagine very low level. Like, did you have is there a lot of like connection between the programming you do and on the satellites versus your own project in RenPy?
Hmm. I want to say
Because it's
like
super different, isn't it? Because
I'd say
like,
yes. I'd say very much yes, but at the same time, like there's always fundamentals in terms of like project management is always the same. Both have like systems where like they have to be reliable. Like if RunPy has a bug or work has a bug, that's going to really inconvenience people. So I'd say it's much more like connections on like the software engineering level. Um, there's occasionally like build system stuff get once in a while has influenced the two projects have influenced each other. Reliably building large amounts of software is something both projects take advantage, but like there isn't really much in the way of like actual like code that should be. Plus, the code that I write is owned by the company I work for versus RunPy is owned by me.
yeah. So like, how did you So I guess it's just a hobby of you like because like what do you like doing better? The satellites, or do you like doing high level Python, writing your own like
Um,
uh you know which one do you like better? Oh,
so like I don't know how to live without programming. The first computer I got was a Commodore 64. In fact, it's up on the wall next to me. And like the first thing I did program I ran was Logo, which is a programming language for it. It was designed for basically children that didn't know algebra. It had this little turtle you move around the screen to draw like shapes and stuff. And so I have no experience of living without programming. Because that's just how computers were back. Like I got this when I was maybe 6 or 7. Um, so very very little experience of living without programming. I'd say they're like two very different. One nice got the satellites is it's very like time. Like the satellite is only overhead for like a few minutes at a time, like 20 minutes, maybe 3 times a day. Um, so like they don't really conflict that much with each other. And like it's very much like I will say like I think RenPy just like if I had to pick, I'd work on RenPy, but like I don't have to pick it. And it's nice to have like something that gets me outdoors. I like also like RenPy is very much an online community. Like I don't know anyone. I know the Stony Brook Game Development Club. I often go to their con and that kind of stuff. But like by and large, I don't know really any RenPy users in the local area. By contrast, the Ham Radio Club is all people from like my town and the next town over. So like I think they kind of complement each other very well.
oh, that's really interesting actually. Because when you're just talking about how you just get your original computer, and like did you get into computer science through game dev, or did you get it through like the more interesting like satellite type of stuff, or like
And the satellite
like
stuff came later. I was
I
in computer science. I'd say it was less game dev, more just like programming in general. Like it was just pretty clear. Like by the time I was like, I started off, I started off just being, the kid that knew computers. Like that was my hobby, and like programming, just game playing, game dev. It was all kind of the same thing. Like when you're in high school, game dev is like your main way of programming because what else are you gonna? Nobody's gonna hire you to make a spreadsheet. And then like that turned into a job with my elementary school computer teacher. Her husband ran a computer repair shop, um, And like that was back when computer repair shops, like, they did lots of things. They did everything from like, my first job was, computer broke, fix it. And then, oh, we need a little custom programming to do something. Oh, we're starting an ISP. We want to make web pages for companies. It was just like there was a bit of hustle to the company, and I was part of that, and so had like a fairly wide breadth of experience. And then so but yeah, it was like the satellite stuff is maybe really only since the pandemic did I get the ham radio hobby.
I see, because it's really interesting to me how like, you kind of like went into some game dev stuff, and then normally, you know, you make like an engine, and your goal is to professionally then work on games with a bigger company, right? But you didn't take that path. You decided to do like the open. You created RenPy, but then is just your professional career is not game dev, which is like a lot of times you hear people who go, yeah, they create their engine, they go to like a big game company, and I think that's really interesting, man.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, part of it is like, the only way to make money off an engine is to sell it. And like, visual novels are not a big community. And especially back when I started, like my original thought was that RenPy would be, my original thought was that there'd be 100 teams that make visual novels and maybe 50 of them would use RenPy. I was off by several orders of magnitude, but like if I had sold the engine, I don't think it would be nearly what it is today. And I mean, it is, like what could it be, if I was working on it full time? I mean, in practice, like I enjoy my job quite a bit. It's really interesting, and it's like trying to make systems that run on microwatts of power is just a fun experience. So like I wouldn't want to. I think I work for a good company with good people that are quite flexible. So I don't really have much of a desire to change. But yeah, it is, and again, part of it is, like, I do make sacrifices in terms of like, yeah, I'm home a lot, I don't have it, I don't travel very much, that kind of stuff. But, um, probably if like, I was working 80 hours a week, I'd make a lot more than I do now, but, yeah, I enjoy my life, and that's what matters.
no, yeah,
And,
yeah, absolutely.
and you make a
Yeah, because
positive contribution to the world, I think.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because actually, a previous person we had on here, Ramon, who made Raylib, and that guy, he does Raylib full time. Basically, he doesn't have another job, which is really interesting because, you know, just like you said, you don't make a lot of money off of it, and so because it's open source, and so he doesn't sell it. So it's like it's really interesting to see that, you just put in like an hour or two a day, you grind every day, and it just goes, and it turned out to be an amazing project over like the 20 years you've been working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I that's really awesome.
And I
But
will say, we do make good use of like a ton of libraries, like the GLTF stuff that was added. 90% of that was integrating the Open Asset Importer library. So like the amount that I wrote in RenPy was much smaller. So like when I say that being open source is that we can choose to take dependencies that add major features without me having to develop them entirely from scratch.
yeah, that's really interesting. But yeah, thank you for answering my questions. I'm gonna open up for other people now. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a few more, but I want to give anyone else who has a question a chance to go.
Hey, I got a question. I'm Tyler.
So,
Um, what's your favorite feature you worked on for RenPy?
favorite feature, probably like I'd say the two that come to mind are one, the rollback support, just because like it was very early in the process I worked on it. It was something people didn't do, but like being able to reset the state of a Python, at least the runtime environment, back in time instantly was I just thought a really fun feature to have. Plus, it meant I could make the wrong choice and then go back and remake it, and that fits my playstyle a lot. And then accessibility has just been the most rewarding feature, just because you're like I've never felt bad about spending the time to implement an accessibility feature. Like it really does benefit people, and a lot of people are unlike like the people who say, "Oh, I didn't realize it had this accessibility feature." Thank you. Like that's one of the few times people will thank me for a particular feature. So that becomes just very rewarding.
Okay, thank you. Cool.
Yeah, I had a question about kind of like what were the most technically challenging features you've worked on? Because we worked on kind of a visual novel game in C that was without a lot of foundation aside from like SDL. So kind of like implementing the language that specifies like the events and then like having an interpreter that operates on the events and adding things like rolling back. So like what you said, where it's like replay and you can reverse events, stuff like
Yeah.
that is kind of challenging. So I'm curious, like in your experience on the whole project, what have been the most challenging components?
I'd say probably the single most challenging one has got to be the screen language and specifically the optimizations that make screen language fast. So screen language is the excuse me, the is the interface language. Its model is actually kind of imperative. It's saying like show this button, show this, but the idea is like theoretically it runs every frame. In practice, you wouldn't want to run it every frame because that's too slow. So analyzing it, determining what is static, what can change, what has changed, and making a minimal set of updates to this thing that looks imperative uh, was a very challenging. I'd say that's probably like I probably could have spun a PhD dissertation out of that had I really. I have one already, so I didn't need to. But like, I probably could have. I probably could have like with enough like work and papers and all of that, turned that into PhD dissertation. I'd say.
So earlier you did allude to being a graduate student at one point. What was
Yeah.
your dissertation?
Automatic incrementalization of object set queries, which is actually quite which is actually related, but basically it's taking essentially like Python comprehensions and then automatically generating code that analyzes when objects are changed and will then maintain like a materialized view. If it was a database materialized view, this was done inside the programming language environment. So when the data would essentially automatically maintain these queries over sets for you.
It's pretty cool. Have you seen any, I don't know, any application of the research over the years, or have you come up with any ideas for anything based around it?
I've seen similar stuff done by other people. I've kind of like left the academic thing. It just like I'm much more of like a systems guy and a programming guy than like an academic. Like I would much rather build software than write grant proposals. So I've kind of dropped out of that a bit, but I do see like it gets cited every once in a while,
Nice.
and not just by my advisor.
Is your advisor still around and publishing?
Yeah, she is. We actually had lunch. We had lunch a week or two ago. That's fun.
Nice. What university is it?
Stony Brook. I was actually at Stony Brook when I made Ren'Py and was procrastinating on one of the earlier exams, but that led up to dissertation.
Nice. Another question I had was like, do you have any visual novel recommendations for people? It doesn't have to be made in RenPy.
Um, well, I do have the featured ones, but I'd say I really love the stories from Soul the Gun Dog that came out recently. Just because it's such a cool look for the game. Um, that was just that was just uh it's a very like retro like 1990s era look, but then with a modern story. That I just thought was a really fun game. And I also say really enjoyed it. Somewhat content warning because it's very violent and some like I'd say nudity, but not like prurient nudity. Just like like there's some like gore type imagery, but Slay the Princess. Just because I thought Slay the Princess had some really interesting uses of the visual novel mechanic and like the basic loop and that kind of stuff.
Cool.
But I will say that like be a little careful because like I mean it would be like somebody who makes a printing press recommending a novel for you to read because like these are ones that appeal to me as like the sort of games I enjoy playing and things like that. There are entire genres, like one like games meant for women that have like male romance in them that I'm sure plenty of people love those, but that's just not. There could be like incredible games there that I just don't know about, and I'm certain there are. There are certainly titles that I hear about, but that just aren't games I played.
Has the visual novel scene kind of changed meaningfully in the past 20 years? I imagine when you were into it before Ren'Py that there might not have been a lot of English translations for games.
Well, there certainly was. There's actually so there weren't a lot of English translations, but I'd say like translations were the majority of stuff, and it's gone from Japan made most of the games to probably rest of the world makes more games, but probably significantly now. I'd say you know originally visual novels are very much an offshoot of the anime community, and like it's become much more of like a standard game dev genre at this point. Um, what else? I'd say like Patreon, like it's gone from like relatively minute go from like relatively small projects that released to certain projects like we'll just make lots of small like episodic releases, which is at least from an engine designer like Empire is very much designed around okay, you make the game and then you release it. So still haven't totally cracked the problem of multi releases, and we're getting better about that. Save
Nice.
competitively is a lot less of a problem than it once was, but
Oh, interesting. Cool.
I'd say also like the size of games have just gone up in every way. Like got like when it was originally a hobby community where like your largest games might take an hour or two to play through. It just makes very different demands on the engine. Like literally, one of the big focus of Run by 8.4 was changing the representation of the script in memory to just reduce the amount of memory. Ren'Py loads the game script in the game script advance. It'll dynamically load images and movies and such, but the actual game script stays in memory all the time. And that was taking up enough memory that, like on an Android phone, some of which have like still relatively small amounts of memory, some games just wouldn't run. So we now compress the script to reduce the memory quite a bit. Like
Nice.
one big thing was that like the game script objects were all garbage collectible. But it turns out that like you'll never need to run the garbage collector on the game script because it loads and then stays in memory. That's not totally true, but assume it is for this. So removing the 16 bytes or whatever it was for garbage collection overhead, 16 bytes times a million objects is 60 megabytes right there.
Yeah. Have you had to do any kind of interesting optimization strategies other than that over the years?
I'd say like all sorts of them. I mentioned the one for the incremental updates of screens. Certainly, moving to the GPU to use it to draw pictures to the screen you can claim that was an optimization. Um, there's certainly some, the goal is to be fast without like, the goal is to be maintainable. There are decisions that are made because like, if I had 100 programmers, then I might make some certain decisions differently than, 5 people working on it. But yeah, like there certainly are. Yeah, it's tough to think of one in particular, but like there certainly have been optimizations made.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think I have exhausted all my questions. I'm just going to open it up one more time to see if anyone else has any other questions, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah, so since we're college students, um, do you have any advice for us as we continue our journey through computer science?
One,
And
take the hard courses. Like things like compilers, programming languages. Like I always found like that's the stuff like database theory, things like that. Those are stuff that become that like stays at like there are courses that are like like learn React or things like that, and then there's courses like compiler theory. React, 10 years from now there'll almost certainly be something else that replaced it, but compiler theory is going to be pretty stable, and like what you learn from those courses I think is it and then you're at the best time of your life. Make sure you put together projects that, like, when it comes time to get a job, you can show people I did this. That's very nice. Um, and then and like, yeah, like, you had a very nice point in your life where, like, you can, like, you're not trying to balance a life, a family. Yeah, I don't have a family, so that's at least part of why I can do this. But a life and family is, some of your biggest transitions are going to be like, okay, I started my job. Now all these projects that you were working on, have plenty of time for, suddenly, like, I just worked 8 hours a day and commuted some more. How am I going to do this? And so, like, if you even want to do this, and it's perfectly fine to say, okay, I'm doing my part just by working, making something of value, paying my taxes. That's perfectly valid. But if you decide to continue this, then it's like balancing that, like, quarter life crisis out was always fairly difficult.
Thanks, man. I just want to say thank you for interviewing with us today. It's been really awesome. You're really cool. Thank
No,
you.
you guys have had some really good questions.
Anyone else? Cool. Well, yeah, Tom, thank you so much for meeting with us today. It was really awesome. It's really cool to speak with people who I've been aware of and like been aware of their work for a long time. But I don't really know that much beyond like surface level. So it's really cool to hear from you. And we're really appreciative of your time.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Take care, everyone.